Tonight, the I-Team has a letter from El Chapo in which he implies that U.S. prison officials are bullying him because he has escaped before.
It's no secret that El Chapo's conditions at the Florence Supermax federal prison are rough, but now his desperate letters are describing his experience as torture. Many people say that's the only reasonable fate for a man who tortured and killed for half a century. Let's see what we think after exploring how the U.S. is torturing Chapo today.
The El Chapo escape fears are not unfounded. He tunneled out of the last Mexican prison where he was locked up and rode to freedom on an underground motorcycle. That was his second escape.
When El Chapo was arrested in 2016, it was not his first time. And in fact, when Mexican authorities caught him trying to tunnel his way out of their reach, they knew they would have to send him to the U.S. The U.S. government had insisted on having Chapo extradited to the U.S. ever since his first arrest back in 1993, and yet Mexico refused twice, and Chapo escaped twice. If there's anyone who could pull off a prison break, it's probably El Chapo. When he climbed the ranks of the Guadalajara cartel in the 1980s, he did it using his master tunneling skills. Chapo's state-of-the-art tunnels created new, longer, more secure smuggling routes to move narcotics from Mexico into the United States. When Chapo founded his own cartel, tunnels became one of the Sinaloa's greatest trademarks. These underground passages also proved handy after Chapo's arrests. In 1993, he was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But in 2001, fearing stricter extradition laws, he escaped in a prison laundry cart after bribing officials to the tune of $2.5 million. El Chapo then lived on the run for 13 years before authorities tracked him down and arrested him again in 2014. They sent him to a maximum security prison in Mexico. But with deep pockets and a massive fortune, El Chapo found a way out again. He used a team to build an underground tunnel beneath his prison cell shower, leading to a vacant property his wife had just purchased. He was working on another tunnel with his guard in January 2016 when he was caught, arrested, and sent off to New York. From there on out, life was not the same for Chapo. Until then, he was used to getting preferential treatment everywhere he went, even prison. He knew his money and notoriety would have people opening doors for him forever. Reports suggest that, while in Mexican prison, Chapo was hugely privileged, getting access to chef-made food, cigarettes, alcohol, and even avoiding the mandatory head shaving.
La atención es que el reo que dicen que es el Chapo tiene cabello. Todos los días tienes que afeitarte.
The fact that Chapo was not made to shave his head like the other prisoners goes to show he still had some level of power over the warden and the guards. Plus, how could he have escaped if he didn't? Without several guards protecting him and his cartel people while they dug, there is no way El Chapo could have escaped. Yet the Mexican government insisted no one was bribed in this case.
Me parece que es una burla a la sociedad el que nos los quieran presentar de esta manera, porque si no le abrieron la puerta, le abrieron un túnel. La principal responsabilidad es de Peña Nieto, de Osorio Chong, del secretario de Seguridad, de la Procuradora, de la Coordinadora General de los FRS.
Fast forward to 2017, and El Chapo was extradited to New York to finally face the consequences of his unspeakable crimes. He was in a New York prison for 2 years, until his trial concluded, and he was sentenced to life in prison at the Florence Supermax, or the ADX Florence. Ever since his incarceration at the Manhattan prison awaiting trial, Chapo began to send letters complaining about the deplorable conditions in his cell. That's when the word first came up. Guzman made a rare public statement at his sentencing, chastising authorities for conditions at New York's Metropolitan Correctional Center that he equated with torture. He said he was denied access to sunlight and forced to drink unsanitary water. He said he had to use wadded-up toilet paper as earplugs to sleep amid noise from an air vent near his cell. Prolonged denial of sunlight can have severe physical and psychological impacts. It can disrupt circadian rhythms, leading to sleep disorders, vitamin D deficiency, weakened immune function, and increased risk of depression. The lack of natural light and sensory stimulation can also cause disorientation and cognitive impairment over time. Denial of clean water is extremely dangerous to health. Dehydration quickly impacts physical and mental functioning. Forcing prisoners to drink contaminated water can lead to serious illnesses. Beyond the physical effects, using water access as a means of control can induce anxiety, helplessness, and despair in prisoners. These deprivations, especially when combined with other harsh conditions, can amount to cruel and inhumane treatment. Many human rights organizations consider such practices forms of torture due to the severe suffering they can inflict, but this was still small potatoes in comparison to what followed at the ADX Florence. In 2019, Chapo was ordered to pay $12 billion in restitution. He was also told he would be dying inside the Florence Supermax. Before he was shipped off, he said, "Since the government will send me to a jail where my name will not ever be heard again, I take this opportunity to say there was no justice here. It has been psychological and mental torture 24 hours a day." The former Florence Supermax warden, Cameron Lindsay, said, "Supermax is austere and it is run with absolute structure and security in mind. From an operational perspective, it's the most secure prison on earth. I would have been shocked if they designated Chapo anywhere else." He also said, "The experience there is like life after death, or should I say, life there is worse than death. That's because this prison is not meant for short sentences or for those with a chance at rehabilitation. Those sent to the ADX Florence are considered the world's lowest. Psychopathic criminals who have committed shocking atrocities, people with hardly any chance at even feeling remorse for what they've done, let alone prove they could change for the better." Chapo is now inside the same prison as the Unabomber, the Oklahoma City bomber, the Boston Marathon bomber, and 9/11 conspirator Zacarias Moussaoui. Florence Supermax prisoners face extreme isolation, confined to their cells for 23 hours daily. Human interaction is minimal, and only with a guard or two, that hour they have to themselves, they can leave their cell and walk through a courtyard, shackled from head to toe, accompanied by a guard. Indeed, Chapo will never see his jailmates. A small 4-inch window offers the only view outside, revealing little of the 380-person complex. The limited window view is intentionally designed to disorient inmates about their location within the facility. That's because Supermax inmates are also considered a flight risk. In the case of Chapo, that's not even unfounded. He escaped twice. The Federal Bureau of Prisons promised he will never escape again. Ex-warden Cameron Lindsay put it simply, "He ain't going anywhere, brother. He's not going anywhere." Prolonged isolation can have severe psychological and physiological impacts on a person. The human brain is wired for social interaction and environmental stimulation. When deprived of these essential inputs for extended periods, it can lead to a cascade of mental health issues. Isolation often results in anxiety, depression, paranoia, and hallucinations. The lack of human contact and sensory stimuli can cause cognitive decline, memory problems, and difficulty concentrating. In extreme cases, it may lead to a complete loss of sense of self and reality, a condition sometimes referred to as isolation psychosis. And because the mind and body are closely intertwined, these mental health issues can manifest in physical symptoms. The stress of isolation triggers the release of cortisol and other stress hormones, which can weaken the immune system, increase inflammation, and contribute to cardiovascular problems. Sleep disturbances are common, further exacerbating both mental and physical health issues. The lack of physical activity, often accompanying isolation, can lead to muscle atrophy and decreased cardiovascular health. The psychological distress can also cause or worsen gastrointestinal problems, headaches, and chronic pain conditions. The mental toll of extreme isolation reverberates throughout the entire body. It's not an exaggeration to say that it accelerates mortality. Indeed, in the case of ADX Florence, reports suggest about 1/3 of inmates have been diagnosed with serious mental health conditions. There have been accounts of prisoners exhibiting signs of severe distress, including prolonged yelling and self-harm behaviors, potentially linked to the intense isolation and confinement conditions. A 2012 lawsuit against the ADX stated, "It is a haunting view. Their madness begets cruelty and indifference from prison officials and doctors, and the cruelty and indifference from the officials and doctors begets more madness. In the meantime, the American taxpayer pays for all of it. The alleged abuse and neglect and even torture is done in our name." These reports are truly worrying and suggest that the prison is truly inhumane. El Chapo has also fallen victim to these treatments, and he has let wardens and judges know regularly. In July 2023, El Chapo wrote a letter to Judge Brian Cogan, who had sentenced him to life imprisonment at the Florence Supermax.
Chapo says prison authorities are preventing him from receiving attorney documents for new court motions. They always use the excuse that it's because Guzman fled from a Mexican prison, he writes. This is a ridiculous claim used to justify the anomalies.
Guzman, who was escaped Mexican high-security prisons twice, is being kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day at the Manhattan facility.
If they want him to have access to hire a lawyer, we believe he needs to be able to meet with his family or at least speak to his family and confer with them about his wishes regarding counsel.
Indeed, the Supermax staff is deliberately trying to keep Chapo away from his lawyers, and in particular, his family. That's because Emma Coronel, who is still married to Chapo, famously helped him escape back in 2015. She even served 3 years in prison for it, sprinkled with money laundering charges.
The wife of drug kingpin El Chapo has been released from a Long Beach halfway house. Emma Aispuro was convicted in 2021 of drug trafficking and money laundering.
Once again, the fears are not unfounded that if Chapo sees Emma, he will try and work his way out of the prison. Here's an interesting plot twist. In August 2024, several of Chapo's prison letters were leaked and published in the Latin Times. As it turns out, Chapo is speaking to his wife, and most of the text sounds like business, not love. Regarding El Clito, increase the production to make it last. Send my regards to El Clito. Tell him to please help me out so that the first sale is on my behalf, because I have a lot of expenses here. Yeah, not how are the girls or how have you been, but code names and business advice. The letters to Emma stand in stark contrast to those Chapo sent to a woman named Lucero Sanchez. Lucero is an elected official to the Mexican Congress, but she is also Chapo's alleged mistress. Take a look at his letters to her. I gladly and lovingly reply to your letter, wishing that when you receive my letter, you and the whole family and our children are well, which is my greatest wish. I was very happy to receive your letter, my love, and reading it made me very happy to know that our son is doing well. What a joy. Make sure to take care of yourself, as getting tired or stressed could harm you. I won't mention anything that might upset you, my love. The only favor I ask is that when they write to me or visit, you give me the details of when you were at the clinic. I don't think this will be too much trouble for you, my love. I really want to see you. Keep talking to the lawyer about the identification. It should be ready when you come to visit me. Yep, it even appears like Chapo has several with Lucero, nicknamed La Chapo Diputada. Chapo has also written several letters to the warden asking him to see his loved ones. I kindly ask that you authorize my wife to visit me and bring my daughters as well. My wife has fulfilled the house arrest conditions set on September 13th, 2023, and from that date onwards, she will be able to travel throughout the country as she will only be on probation. But time and time again, he has been denied permission to see his wife, or the visits have been deferred for months at a time. The reason is simple. Guzman wrote that the prosecutors were opposed to her visiting me in New York because they believed she could pass threatening messages to the witnesses. He maintained that this was ridiculous since all conversations during the visits are recorded. It's funny how El Chapo keeps using the word ridiculous in his letters. Even his pleas come off as threats. Despite the now public affair, Chapo's wife Emma continues to fight for him, appearing on TV and requesting her husband receives better conditions inside his prison.
Lo que pedimos es que lo atiendan y que pues apliquen los derechos humanos con él.
However, many people dug into her public appearances and expressed their doubts that these are Emma's sincere feelings.
Bueno, yo pienso que es lo que haría cualquier esposa en mi lugar, ¿no? Estar con su esposo en momentos difíciles que son lo que está pasando en este momento.
But when you're knee-deep in the Sinaloa cartel, can you afford to criticize your ex-drug lord husband publicly? His kids still run the cartel. Emma knows she and her daughters could be in danger if she spoke ill or Chapo or stopped helping him altogether. Perhaps it's fear, not love, that's keeping her close to him, despite his affairs and unspeakable crimes. As of 2024, Chapo is still fighting tooth and nail to get better conditions inside the Florence Supermax. His lawyers wrote, "The deprivation of sunlight and fresh air over an excessive 27-month period is causing psychological scarring. He is suffering many symptoms of distress as a result of this lengthy, unwarranted punishment." His lawyers also sent a so-called SOS message to Mexico's outgoing president. According to one of his lawyers, Jose Refugio Rodriguez, Guzman is unhappy with the harsh prison conditions, including isolation and a lack of sunlight. The message, described as an SOS, was transmitted via one of Guzman's lawyers in the United States as well as his family. He hopes to return to face outstanding charges and complete his sentence in Mexico under a prison agreement between the two countries. But for now, El Chapo remains confined to his cell, which he complains is not only dark and isolated, but loud. Guards are always there, chatting day and night, and he can barely sleep. These are forms of torture, the less obvious ones. Chapo doesn't receive the treatment he subjected others to. In a way, for him, it might be harder to endure. During his 2-year trial, Chapo listened to countless things he'd done, things so horrible, we can't even describe them in all their horror. Many of Chapo's former bodyguards, or foot soldiers, took the stand and told of times when Chapo personally tortured others to death. Sometimes, his soldiers offered to give their victims a quick death, but Chapo insisted. He wanted to make them suffer first, and he wanted to be the one who pulled the final trigger. Once, after he was done, he still wasn't. He decided to sew his victim's face on a football and leave if at the town hall as a New Year's present. Hernandez's face, sewn onto a football, was left in a plastic bag near City Hall. A note read, "Happy New Year because this will be your last." What the Florence Supermax does to its inmates is unacceptable, no matter what they did before. The way things look right now, El Chapo will rot in the Florence Supermax, and this time, he won't be getting any preferential treatment, no matter how much he pleads with high-ranking authorities. Perhaps now, he finally has all the time he needs to think about what he's done. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Do you think El Chapo deserves his fate, or should such prisons not exist at all? Leave a comment, and before you go, make sure you like and subscribe. See you soon.